Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. If you're ready for a change, try a new way to think with our guest, Roger Martin. Roger, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, Bill, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Roger, I was kidding you before the show. The title of your book is A New Way to Think, and I've been using the old way for about 75 years now, so what's wrong with it? Where have you been all my life?
Hey, I'm sure that your success, Bill, has a lot to do with many of the ways you think are excellent ways, and you've tested them out, and they work.
Well, that's true. Okay.
And then that's basically what I would like people to do, is to be tough on the way they think, right? So that if they're in a pattern of thinking that doesn't get them the results that they want, they won't keep saying, I just need to try harder, or I just need to do more of that. I just need to dedicate it. And at a certain point say, that way of thinking, that model I'm using to take action just doesn't work, and then try a new one. And I bet in those 75 years, you've done that a number of times. And when you do that, I say you're in control of the way you think. You own your models rather than your models owning you, and you just keep using them even if they don't work.
So I've actually been doing it, but maybe I didn't know it, or I didn't put it under this term. Okay, for me, good.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah,
you're a master salesman. I like the way you put that. You already have me feeling better about things. Now, your book, though, that you put it down in print, did this come about as a result of the pandemic, or was it a particular event or something that you saw in the business world that said, we've got to put this in writing?
Oh, it would have been nice to think that it came because of the pandemic, but it didn't. Though I think lots of what happened in the pandemic kind of relates to the book. This came from observations from my work in the business world of watching businesses keep on using models that kind of seemed to make sense on the surface, but didn't really, and not stopping using them when they didn't work. And I'll give an example would be, we should align the interests of managers with the shareholders by giving managers stock-based compensation. That'll align their interests. That came into existence in the mid to late 70s and really accelerated during the 80s, so that it was ubiquitously used as the model. Give the CEO lots of stock-based compensation, and boy, they'll act in the interest of shareholders.
And it sounds good. I mean, to be honest, right?
Yeah.
I mean, nothing radical or that would really upset people, and a lot of managers would be happy.
Yeah, well, managers certainly were happy because CEO compensation went up at least 10x, probably more like 20x in real terms if you measure it correctly. But you know what didn't happen, right? Shareholder returns did not go up on average across the board as this became the model. And you got multi-billion-dollar stock frauds starting to happen as more of a routine thing, lots of volatility in stock prices. And people just didn't stop, and they still really haven't stopped to say, was this a good idea? Did this actually align the interests of shareholders and management? And what I'd argue is it did the opposite, right? So that, in fact, what was the smartest thing to do if you were a bloody-minded CEO, right, is to produce volatility in your stock so that you get a whole lot of options when your stock is down that earn you lots of money when your stock goes up, even if it didn't go up higher than what the stock price you inherited. Because the person who knows most about what's happening in the future and how to influence the stock price is the CEO. So they started focusing more on increasing the expectations people in the market saw about their stock, rather than increasing the real performance of the stock.
Now, I know this is a business book, but as I'm hearing you explain it very well, I think this applies to all of us and everything. It could apply to a teacher. It could apply to a house husband or a housewife who's taking care of what we might call daily tasks or menial tasks, but they might find that there's a better way. They've been doing it this way, and some actions might be better done in the morning and others in the afternoon because of traffic and volume and things like that. So am I right? It could apply anywhere.
Absolutely. And the reason is that we basically don't take action without having a reason for doing it, right? Our action is designed and it follows a model, right? You could say, my model is whatever, spare the rod and spoil the child. That's a model, right? And it may or may not work, right? And all I'm saying is, if it doesn't seem to be working, don't do more of it in hopes that it will. Think and ask yourself the question, is there a different way to do this? And are the assumptions that are built into my model actually flawed in some important way? Unfortunately, they often are.
Would I be right in saying, all of us learned that new word Zoom about 2.5 years ago?
Sure.
And most of us didn't know what it was. If you're someone like me, said, I couldn't work a Zoomer, and I don't know what a Zoomer is. And I may even think it's some type of new ice cream cone or something. But
that's what it is, Bill.
Is it? Okay, now I'm feeling even better about it. Don't
worry. Just have a Zoom flavored instead of pistachio flavored.
But almost...
That's it's a good illustration. So there was a model in the world prior to pandemic and the use of Zoom. Well, you really can't conduct business. You can't develop business relationships over Zoom. You have to be in person, right? That was a model that I certainly heard lots of. Well, at this point, I think most people would say, Zoom's not perfect for everything, but it works a lot better than we ever imagined, right? I for what it's worth, in the work that I do, what I do is I advise CEOs, and I used to have a model, right, which was I give the CEO 1 day a quarter, and I'll come to their place of business and work with them for a day, one each quarter. COVID hit. That didn't work, right? You couldn't travel. Their offices weren't open. And so we started doing, instead of 1 day a quarter in person, we'll do 2 hours a month on Zoom.
And that was filled the need. It supplied it to the people. They could still better themselves, make their company more productive. And you didn't have to fly around or be in different cities or locations or driving, whatever.
Yes. And many of them ended up liking it more, because it turns out that was 3 times a month. Frequency is more. The time they had to allocate at one time was less, which they liked more. And so I don't think, in some sense, I'm ever going to go back to the old model. I am flying around less, but not because of me. It's because they liked it better. And I think it'll be a hybrid. I'll see them once a year in person and the rest on Zoom for many of them. But that's an example of, if I would have stuck with no, I'm going to stop working with these folks until the end of the pandemic, because the model is 1 day a month in their offices. If I did that, I don't think I would have learned. I would have been owned by the model, where I just have in my mind that's the way it works best, instead of developing a new one.
Now, especially with you, because you've just said it really hit home with you. For most businesses that now are experiencing either the Great Resignation and or being working from home or a hybrid version, has your business almost boomed because of that in point of volume? Maybe your time is less because you can actually do it from home and don't have to waste time in airports and on roads. But has that created a bigger need for you opening up people's minds?
It seems to have, yeah. 2022 will be the biggest year ever for the business. But you mentioned the Great Resignation, and that there's a chapter in the book that that relates very much to that, and which and I'm flabbergasted at what I see, because again, businesses have kind of the wrong model, I would say, and they're inviting resignation. And here's how it works. It turns out that the model in business says that this thing called loyalty is this super important thing. So it's often used with customers. Customer loyalty is important to keeping your customers and having them believe in you and the product, and that will make them loyal. So that every time they think about a purchase decision, they'll say, "I'm loyal to whatever. I'm loyal to Crest toothpaste, so I will always buy Crest." It turns out that a better model says that we are driven more by habit than we are by loyalty. A subconscious thing, which just has ourselves being drawn to something because it's our habit. And it turns out that the brain science has demonstrated, kind of beyond a shadow of a doubt, that our subconscious loves familiarity and comfort more than anything else. And that's why if you have a Crest habit, when you go to the drugstore or grocery store to buy toothpaste because you run out, your subconscious kind of screams at you, buy Crest. Buy Crest. That's the one we know. Don't, if your hand is heading towards the Colgate tube, it's like, why are you doing that? Bill, what are you doing? Right? It wants you to do the most comfortable and familiar thing.
That's so amazing, I think, and it's so true. And here we are with such smart people like yourself and business leaders who are very bright, intelligent men and women in many different fields. And yet what you're saying about all of us is so true. And I see you laughing because this is what's making your business so important, right?
Well, it is interesting. That's what I try to do, help people with their models. But let's go to then COVID, right? So what was your habit if you were, you're in Long Island, if you were in Long Island and living out there and working at a bank downtown Manhattan? Your habit would be to get on the train every morning and go into Manhattan, do the commute, go to your office, do your work, come back home. And that was just your habit. Then it was forcibly interrupted by the pandemic, and your place of work closed down. Their offices then said, you need to work from home and you need to work remotely. And that was a real adjustment for people, right? People sort of found that difficult and challenging at first because their habit was totally interrupted. But they did it because it was by fiat, right? The government said it's closed down. So people sort of accepted it, that was the case. But then after 2 years, what was the habit? Rolling on a bed, going to your home office in the basement or the guest bedroom or wherever you had set up, and getting your coffee, going to that office, working, and then at the end of the day, saying, "Okay, well, I'm done. Oh, then I happen to be home." That became the ingrained habit, the familiar, comfortable thing. When companies called up and said, "Pandemic's over, and you need to come back to work," the subconscious was saying, oh my God, they want me to work remotely. So the office had become the new remotely. Right? That was remote work. And the subconscious had the same reaction it did when you told them it had to work remotely, i.e. away from the office, because its habit after 2 years is long ingrained. And what happens when you interrupt a habit is you go back to being even with all the other alternatives, right? So when you have a habit, your habit is Crest, and you're in the toothpaste aisle, right? And Colgate and Sensodyne and whatever else is on the shelves. Everything else starts a race at the start line, and Crest, it's a 100-yard dash, and Crest starts at the 95-yard line, and the gun goes off, and who wins? Right? crest.
I'll never look at toothpaste again the same way because of this conversation with you. I just want you to know that now it's going to be a whole thought. Should I pick this one? Is this $2 more? Is that
and see what happens. See what happens when your arm moves to one that you don't use. You'll get a funny feeling because your subconscious is yelling at your conscious.
And I'm going to blame you for it, Roger. Before we move, sure.
Can I just say what happened? When the company started to say you must come back to work, is the job that had become your habit was taken away from you. That's what your subconscious thinks. And instead, you have to choose from this new job, which involves going to the office, or maybe continuing to work from home, be a gig economy, work for some other company that isn't insisting that you come home. And it took you from the 90-yard line and 100-yard dash back to the starting line. And that's the reason for the Great Resignation. Companies are interrupting a habit in a very blunt way, and they're getting their just rewards, which is they've given up their entire advantage. And to me, it's craziness. And we're going to see more of it. If I'm in charge of this, I'm going to stay on the 95-yard line and take 2 strides and win the race every time, not totally throw that in the dumpster.
I want to be on your team. Roger, before we move ahead, though, I want our audience to know that if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Roger Martin. His book is A New Way to Think, and you've probably observed that already, and especially you'll never buy toothpaste the same way. And Roger, can you tell us where can we get the book, and if there's a website where we can learn more about this?
Sure. You can get the book at any of your favorite booksellers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere. And my website is Roger L. My middle initial is L for Lloyd, rogerlmartin.com. If you forget the L, it'll go to a very nice real estate broker in Houston who kindly forwards things to me. He's a very nice man, but I don't want to have more emails go to him.
Well, we'll give you the information to our audience again. So if you didn't get it down, if you're looking for a new way to think and want to have a fight with your toothpaste salesman, you can listen to what Roger says, and you'll view everything a little differently. Now, Roger, when you go into a company and tell people this, you're upsetting the apple cart a little bit. And none of us like too much change. I guess we all get used to things. And now you're going in and you argue that the trouble with a lot of managers, they try to do this new way to think by mandate. Can you explain what that means and the mistakes they make?
Sure. So it is really hard to get people to change from one model to another model. And quite frankly, Bill, the only way I get that to happen is by asking them the question, how's your current model working, right? Is it producing what you hope it produces? And if they say yes, I say, well, then stick with it. I'm not in the business of trying to get you to stop doing things that work, right? So there are some people who sort of say, well, I think the thing you're doing might work for you, but I don't think that's a good idea. You should do something else. I'm just not in that business, right? But I'm in the business of saying, have you noticed that you keep investing in this and it doesn't produce what you wanted, but then you invest more? Would you like to contemplate doing it a different way? Because if you do, I've got some suggestions or a suggestion about a better way to think about it. But it only, in my experience, all right, I've been around a long time too, like you, Bill. I've been around for a long time, and I've just stopped trying to get people to change something that's working. That's a low value activity. It's got to show signs of not producing what they want, not what I want. Like, it doesn't matter what I want. I just ask them, I would ask you, Bill, you're doing the following thing. Is it getting what you want?
You know, that's a great question. And I think we could apply it across the day. I'm just thinking back in the good old days when you got in the car and went to work or got on a train, sometime if you left at 7 o'clock, you were going to sit in traffic. But if you left at 10 minutes to 7 or 10 minutes after 7, you found that the trip was a few minutes shorter, or you saved time, or maybe even longer. So you kind of found a groove. But maybe if you experiment a little bit and with changes in time and the pandemic, et cetera, 10 minutes earlier might have saved you half an hour. Or maybe going in and doing the first hour's work from home and going in at 9:30, you might have made it in 10 minutes instead of an hour. So just a very simple question. Is it working? If it is, I guess don't upset the apple cart. And if it isn't, time to change something.
Time to change. Time to do the kind of experimentation that you just outlined. That's a wonderful example again of models. The person who is thinking the way you were describing, in my view, owns their model. Right? For them to keep using that model, to have fealty to that model, it has to work for them, and that's good. That's the way. That's the way you get to be an effective person. The minute it stops working, I just say put it on a short leash, put it on probation, and if it keeps not working a couple of times, that's the time to say, how about this? I work for an hour at home and go in later. Oops, well, traffic was even worse then. No, that's not a good model. Let's try another model until you can settle on one.
And for most of us, this doesn't have to be a high business problem that we have. This can be just how do we do our finances? What time of the day do we go to the bank? Should we go twice a week to the cleaners instead of once a week? And maybe it'd be more efficient and save us time, et cetera. So just looking at everything and saying, is it working? And then going back and saying, maybe the new route is better. And what's the final objective? Is it to be home with the children? Is it to make more money, or just to put more time in at the office, or at your particular profession, whatever that might be?
No, exactly. And I wouldn't be quibbling with the question of, hey, you shouldn't care about spending more time with your children. I'd be saying, is the model that you're deploying getting you the time with your children?
Now, you actually did this, I'm sorry to interrupt, but at the Rotman School of Management, is that correct?
That's where I was dean for 15 years. Yes, from 1998 to 2013, and some of this work started while I was.
And
there.
You got them to change their culture. So I mean, you've been there and done that. You're not just telling people you should do this or stop smoking or lift weights. You did it.
No, that's right. That's right. I got hired in part because the previous dean got fired because of a big scandal, and there was factions and all sorts of fighting among the factions, mistrust of senior administration, and so I knew that culture had to change because people were spending too much time fighting and not enough time doing research and teaching, and so I said, well, what can I do to change the culture? I said, for example, well, the way the previous dean kind of handled the fighting is he would let professors come in to his office to kind of complain about the things that they wanted to complain about. Often, well, these other people, the other faction, when they're doing this, and it's making me mad. And then he would try to figure out how to fix that problem. But of course, all that happened was that professors would come more often, more frequently to his office to complain about other people, right? And so you had a culture of, don't try and work out problems with the person you're having a problem with. Go running to the dean to try and get him to do your work for you. And my view is that's not a culture you want. You're not going to get. That's not going to produce better results.
Definitely not. Roger, once again, I want our audience to know, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Our guest today is Roger Martin. His book is A New Way to Think. And if you like what you're hearing, Roger's going to tell us where we can get the book and the website.
Yeah, sure. You can get this on Amazon or any other outlet you're interested in. And if you want to find out more about the book and what I write about, go to my website, which is www.rogerlmartin.com. The L is an important thing to put between the Roger and the Martin.
And you told us why it's going to go to someone else, and it's going to be floating all around.
A very
the place,
nice real estate broker in Houston who gets all sorts of website inquiries and emails.
Yeah, you probably provide him with his best stories because of this. So,
well, yes. Well, I send him copies of my books. He's a real reader, and so I send him copies of my books. And so he's a buddy, and he is very patient.
That's a fair deal. Free books, nice. Just forward emails on. Roger, in sports and everything else today, everything is data. We look at it, and who's watching this TV at what time? What are they doing here? What towns are eating more broccoli than carrots, et cetera, et cetera. But I think in the book you make the argument that it's basically wrong to go with this much data-driven information. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Sure. So if you think about data, Bill, and ask the question, in what era does all data reside? The answer is the past, right? You don't have any data about the future. And so if you're analyzing data, at that point you're analyzing it, it's all in the past. And the challenge is you're taught this in like Statistics 101, right? If you're going to analyze data, that data has to be representative, right? So if you're going to analyze what people care in their new car purchase, and you interview only men, and then try to say, well, that's what people want, you'll be wrong. You don't know in what way you'll be wrong. You'll just be wrong. Or young people, you have to have a representative sample. What that means is that anytime you analyze data, you're assuming your sample is representative because the future will be identical to the past, right? Because if it isn't, then any data analysis you do is kind of completely wrong, right? Because your sample is skewed in some way. So you have to think about that every time you analyze the past. Literally, every single time you analyze the past, you have to ask the question, am I sure the future is identical to the past? And I don't know about you, Bill, but how many times have you seen in the world of business the future to be identical to the past? Right?
Obviously never, but I'm just thinking, you know who your best market is of all? The sports fans who talk to sports radio all day long because they'll be arguing all day. Why are they going by the analytics? Why are they going by this? So you've got supporters. If you want to run for political office, you've got sports fans all over. And if you got the right teams, you're definitely in, and I'm right behind you. Roger, this has been fantastic. You've really awoken certainly me, and I'll never buy toothpaste the same way again. But I think to our audience too, and I want them to know, and I'm going to ask you to give us the information again. The book is A New Way to Think. It's by our guest, Roger L. Martin. And Roger's going to give you the basic information of where you can get it and the website once again.
Sure. You can get it at Amazon or any other place you buy books. You can find out more about the book, about me, at www.rogerlmartin.com, or follow me on Twitter at Roger L. Martin.
And not only is Roger a nice guy, but he certainly makes a lot of sense. And if you stop and think of it, you might say to yourself, gee, I could make my everyday week, my life, my work world a lot easier if I just follow some of these things. You don't even have to follow all of them. So give it a try, take a look at the book, and see what you come out with. Roger, thanks for being with us today.
Bill, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'd like our audience to know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.